Does handheld night photography scare you? Are you worrying about what your shutter speed should be, what your ISO should be, all the different settings? Are you scared that you won't have enough light? Well, everyone is obsessing about gear and settings. I want to show you how you can create magic with just your camera in the night. The night can reveal certain things that daylight might hide, maybe emotion, solitude, intimate moments. Cities at night transform into something entirely different after dark. The challenge of night photography, because it does have some limitations, forces us to be a little bit more intentional as photographers. We need to think more. We need to plan a little bit. And while technical perfection might be impossible, creativity becomes essential. Creativity can sometimes even be more prevalent in the nighttime when the technical difficulties present themselves a little bit more. Hi, I'm Rebecca Kowalski, and I want to share yet another dimension of meaningful photography with you. These are the types of topics that we talk about on this channel, and they will hopefully enhance the depth and quality of our photographs and our experience photographing. So join us and let's continue learning. Today, it will be about handheld nighttime photography. At night, the colors of the light can show mystery or a kind of magic, or the same image in black and white can show solitude or loneliness, or emphasize the shadows. And these light and shadow and the contrast is far more pronounced at night. Walking on the streets of most cities, you'll see stores that are open, and at night we can use the light that's coming from inside these stores in addition to the street lights. I took some photos to illustrate how the light can add to the beauty of an image. Street lights together with the store lights can really help us capture some candid moments and fleeting moments that we might not otherwise catch. For example, this man looking at the books in the bookstore. He has no idea that I'm there. It's an authentic moment, a universal moment, and I have plenty of light. Some of the best night photos can happen also with movement that's on the street. We don't need a fast shutter speed to catch interesting images. We can use a low shutter speed to let in more light and hold the camera steady and show some movement. We can catch the motion of somebody moving, like the bike riders on this main street, while keeping the stores or anything in the background completely stationary and in focus. Don't worry about perfection. We've talked about that many times. I want to show you how I sometimes stabilize myself in order to be able to go to a lower shutter speed and have enough light and maybe even have some blur in the motion that's happening in front of the frame while the background elements are stationary and in focus. The movement in an image conveys something, and it's enhanced in its power and meaning by the background and the stationary elements being stable and just emphasizing the blur of the object that's moving. We don't focus on intense expertise in settings, but let's talk a little bit about our settings. The exposure triangle, the ISO, the film speed or the sensor speed, the aperture, the opening, and the shutter settings. For the ISO, which is our, so to speak, film speed or sensitivity of our sensor, the aperture, which is the opening in our lens, and the shutter speed. The ISO in a night situation, I would recommend somewhere to work between an 800 ISO up to 3200. For most situations, especially if you're on a well-lit street, you could even be on the lower end towards 800 ISO. With modern cameras, we don't have to worry. They can even go up to 6400 or 12800 without too much problem. The truth is, you don't need a $4,000 professional camera body. What you need is any modern camera that can shoot up to 3200 ISO without the image falling apart and becoming really pixelated and noisy. Most cameras, which were made in the last 5 years, can handle this with no problem. And as far as smartphone use with night photography, high-end phone cameras like Samsung, the Galaxy, iPhones, Google Pixel, OnePlus, Motorola, those use advanced software to automatically manage the ISO in low light. Generally, they aim to keep the ISO as low as possible to reduce noise, often relying on a bit of a longer shutter speed to capture more light. While manual ISO settings can be somewhat high on smartphones, and you could use them in let's say, pro mode, the best quality is usually maintained by letting the automatic night mode handle it. And good ISO performance means your photos will still look like photos, not like abstract art made of grain. Every camera handles noise differently. Some add smooth grain that almost looks film-like, and others get muddy. Test your camera at different ISOs before you go out, or even at the beginning of your outing. Find where the limit is. For most people, the top limit can reach even as high as 6400 or 12,800 ISO. But remember, grain is not our enemy. It adds texture, it adds mood, and it also can be fixed in post-processing if we don't want it there. The bottom line is a grainy photo with meaning is far better than no photo at all. As far as our aperture setting, our f-stop, we have lenses that can go as low as 1.2 and f1.4. A lot of professional lenses, especially the zoom lenses, they go down to at least 2.8, if not lower. If you need a little more depth of field, you can go for 2.8 or f4. And then of course, by closing it a little bit, you'll have to lower your shutter speed or go to a higher ISO to compensate for the light. Remember, we might want a wide aperture to have that bokeh look and the blur in the background, but wide open isn't always the best. You might want a little more depth of field to tell more of the story. Consider the story you want to tell. Most of the images I take, unless I really need the aperture open, wide open to let more light in, if I want a little more depth in the street photo and want to see more detail in front or back of my main subject, I'll go a little higher to f4, maybe even f5 or f5.6. If I don't have enough light and I'm using my 35mm for 1.4, and the fact that it's a wider angle lens will definitely give me a little bit more of a depth of field. Quite often I'll use my 35mm only go down to 2.8. It won't let in as much light as the 1.4 lens, but it's smaller, it's more compact, it's easier to walk around and be a little less conspicuous. Each person, you guys can decide what lens you feel the most comfortable with and then work with the settings to get the best image possible with the proper lighting and exposure. We're talking about handheld photography at night. There's the rule we've spoken about of 1 over the focal length as far as our shutter speed, meaning if you're using a 50mm lens, the slowest shutter speed is 1 over 50. That's the rule of thumb. Try to go even a little faster so we don't have camera shake. Most cameras nowadays and lenses have some kind of image stabilization. So for example, a 50mm lens, instead of being at a 1 over 50 shutter speed, the image stabilization could maybe let you go to 1 over 30. But I would still be very careful, because if the image is ruined by some kind of camera movement, it's really not worth the fact that you let in that extra light. So think, be intentional, and be aware what you can do. Lower shutter speeds have to be very focused, and any little shake will show in your photo. Of course, you want to go to lower shutter speeds to do intentional camera movement for its own effect. That also takes practice. That's not what we are working on in this video at attaining the correct image in night photography. We want quality, handheld, low light images. There's an image I want to share with you that I took as I was going home in the southern part of Jerusalem on the way to Bethlehem, facing east into Jerusalem. I just saw the lights of part of the city. It was late at night. I didn't have a tripod and I couldn't put it to a high f-stop because then I wouldn't have had enough light. Although it would have been good to have maybe a little bit of a greater depth of field. But I held myself steady. I held the camera still, and as I've showed you, I wanted to get a decent image even if I had a low f-stop because I didn't have the tripod with me. So as I show you in this video, hold yourself still. You can hold the camera out very steady to the edge of the strap, and you pull it very tight so that it doesn't have any slack at all. And that's one way to keep your camera still when you need to go to a lower shutter speed. Even if you want to do video holding it still with your camera out and you want to pan, it will give you the least amount of shake using the camera strap tight. On auto white balance, you of course could experiment with tungsten for cooler photos or some kind of drama or interesting mood, or put it in a daylight setting for warm street lights. The color temperature can tell your story, and this is something you can do in camera, and you can also do it in your post-processing. See what you would like to convey. But remember, do it with intention and thought. As far as focus settings, I like to use the single point AF to just get exact control on my focus. Although I still sometimes keep it on AFC, on continuous, if I want to follow one person who's moving. When you're in the street, especially at night, your camera could go searching for something, and it's looking for something to focus on, and you don't want it to focus on the wrong thing, or you don't want it to keep struggling and moving back and forth trying to find the focus. See what works best for you, and in different situations you might choose one of those two settings. As far as the camera equipment, people ask me full frame versus crop sensor. A full frame camera has its advantages, but it's for sure not a requirement. Full frame sensors are larger, so they gather in more light. This means you can shoot at a higher ISO with less noise or grain, and then your lenses in essence become wider and faster. But what I tell everyone in my workshops is that I shot night photography, event photography, everything for years with a crop sensor camera. I used the Panasonic Lumix series, GX7, GH4, which I loved. Some of my favorite images were made with those cameras, and I still have some of my older ones. The story matters more than the sensor size, and all cameras can produce great images. And what about mirrorless versus DSLR? Well, with a mirrorless camera, what's the real advantage that I love? With the electronic viewfinder, it shows you the real exposure real time. This is where mirrorless cameras are fantastic. With a DSLR's optic viewfinder, you're looking through the actual lens, but you can't see how your exposure is going to look, meaning how the settings are affecting your exposure and how the settings are affecting the final image. You're basically shooting somewhat blind, except for the fact that hopefully you're looking at your light meter and the settings based on that. With the mirrorless camera and its electronic viewfinder, what you see through your viewfinder is essentially what you'll get. If your image is too dark, then the viewfinder will go dark. If it's properly exposed, you'll see the image in what the camera thinks is properly exposed before you take the shot. You can adjust your ISO, your aperture, shutter speed, whatever it is, all those things affect the exposure, and you can watch real time the image as it gets brighter or darker based on your settings. It's very cool, and it's one of the best things about mirrorless over DSLR. These are just general points. Everything will create images. It's you that creates them. The bottom line, the best camera is the one that you have with you when you're shooting at night or anytime. And that could be your smartphone, and that's totally fine. There were a few small accessories that I think you should have with you when you go out for this night outing or any outing. You should have a lens cloth to wipe off any dust or humidity. Always have at least 1 or 2 extra batteries, especially if you're working in cold weather, because cold weather drains the batteries a lot faster. And maybe some kind of light, which most of us would use the flashlight on our phone to help see our camera settings if it's hard to see where we're located. These are very simple things that you should really have with you anytime you go out on a shoot. Shooting at night isn't just for street photography. There's beautiful buildings and landmarks that are lit up at night and can be easily photographed because the amount of light pouring on them. Like this ancient site, Herodian, a man-made hilltop built by King Herod. The light and shadow make for tremendous drama, and the amount of light gives us the ability to see what we're photographing clearly and give us enough light to be able to photograph handheld. Of course, neon signs are really cool. Car headlights, window lights, and even moonlight is very special. Nighttime photography can also be extra cool if there's rain or fog. That, of course, those will add extra dimension, especially with reflections on the sidewalk as seen in this image. After the rain, with the street lights hitting the sidewalk, we can have images that are so special and magical, and beauty with the reflections and the effect of the light with the colors from the refractions of the rain. And these are images that you can only create at night. This is not something that you can really duplicate in daytime photography, even on a rainy day. Of course, you can get beautiful reflection images in daytime, which we'll talk about at a different time. So the subject that we've discussed in this video is handheld nighttime photography. And the key here is stability without a tripod. And there are many ways to hold the camera stable, like we've shown with holding the camera strap out. You can also just brace yourself and hold your breath to keep the camera stable. You can lean against a wall or a railing. You can put the camera on continuous, like burst shooting mode, in the hope that one of the images will catch in a stable way the subject that you're trying to catch. Because it's shooting so many quickly, it might not have time to have a blur. Most modern cameras and lenses have the image stabilization built in, so we don't always have to worry about a little bit lower of a shutter speed. And again, try the method that I showed you with your camera strap, both for stills and video. As far as composition in low light, it follows pretty much the same rules that we have learned or talked about or alluded to. Rules to be used or broken. Leading lines can be very dramatic, just like in these images of the light rail lines on this major street. I love using frames within a frame, archways, doorways, windows. It's really cool because they're lit up and usually around them is dark or there's some light shooting in, and it gives an amazing look with contrast. The light is so obvious and pronounced, and then the shadows, they say a lot in and of themselves. So what should you photograph? What should we all go out and photograph at night? Obviously, the things that interest us. There's late night workers, couples that are out, people just walking in the city streets, and certainly people that are alone, because at nighttime adds to that effect of aloneness or solitude. And together with the night and the lack of light, a special narrative is created. Even empty streets, they have their own stories to tell. As far as buildings and architecture, there's always interesting buildings that are lit up with artificial light, just like we're working with in street photography. They make for interesting shots. Look around for interesting buildings. Ask yourself, what does the darkness show? Or how is it different than daylight? Show that to the world with your images and your interpretation of the scenes that move you. As you might know and remember, post-processing is something that's important. My philosophy is to enhance images, not to change them in big ways, unless that's your art form. You might want to do some noise reduction, especially if you went to a really high ISO. The idea is to preserve the character of the image and to convey what you want to convey. You might want to change the color grading for mood enhancement and edit it to support your story. That's subjective, and you're the artist. You have the right to create whatever you want. Think of what your goal is. Think, what emotion would I like to convey? And the concept, I think that it's important to remember also, quite often less is more, especially in night photography. To summarize, our mindset shift in general is meaning over perfection. So what your assignment this week is, go out tonight or go out one night soon with just your camera. It's not about conquering the darkness. It's about working with it. Let it serve you in your images. Share some of your night photos and stories. There's got to be a night story waiting for you to tell us. Thank you for being here. I know that your time is valuable, and I'm enjoying reading all of your comments and seeing your images. It's just, I learn from it. I love your comments and seeing your images on Instagram and what matters to you. Thank you, whoever is interested. I'm at Rebecca Co Photo. And I also want to thank those of you who have reached out to do one-on-one sessions together with me. You can email me at photos@imagesthroughtime for more information and details on doing one-on-one sessions. It could be a one-time session, it could be a series. And stay tuned for details on the upcoming YouTube Live, where I'll ask you guys to submit images, and I'll pick 5 images and we'll go over them together. And stay tuned for part 2 on nighttime photography using a tripod. In the meantime, go out at night. Doesn't mean you can't go out in the daytime. Go out in the daytime, get some interesting shots, get experience with the night photography. Don't be intimidated. I know that you can do it. Thank you.